We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is recorded. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and to Aboriginal elders emerging. The following podcast contains accounts of sexual assault. Listener discretion is advised.
Without Nina and Grace doing what they've done, the fight would have taken longer to get to the point where we don't have to go to court and pay money to be able to use our identity. To talk about rape or sexual assault.
That's Janelle O'Connor, who was the first person in the state of Tasmania to exercise her right to be named as a rape survivor on the 24th of April 2020. Up until that point, for Janelle to have told her own story about the night she was sexually assaulted in 1993 using her own name would have been illegal, even though two men were convicted of raping her. The law has finally been amended in Tasmania as a result of the Let Her Speak campaign, spearheaded by child sexual abuse survivor Grace Tame and journalist and anti-sexual assault advocate Nina Funnel.
This is Australian True Crime with Michelle Laurie and Emily Webb.
Nina and Janelle joined us in the studio so that Janelle could exercise her right to tell her story. It's a very graphic account of a brutal sexual assault. So please be warned that it's not for everyone. We ask you to exercise discretion and respect regarding where and when you listen to this podcast and who else can hear it. We started by asking Nina to explain how these old laws work.
You know, the only way in which a sexual assault survivor in Tasmania or the Northern Territory can legally tell their story is if they apply to the court to get a special exemption. But when I first found out about this law, only at that time, I think 3 people had ever succeeded in getting that exemption. And the problem is it's very expensive. It costs about $10,000. So if you've already been sexually assaulted and now you have to go through yet another legal process, having already been through trials and so on, you have to go through, back to court. You have to pay all this money. You actually have to prove to the judge why your story is in the public interest and that you understand the risks that you're taking by self-identifying. So a lot of survivors were like, well, why should I be financially penalised just to earn the basic right of using my own name? It's, it's outrageous. And the reason I started the Let Her Speak campaign was because I was contacted by a young woman called Grace Tame, who had been groomed and repeatedly sexually assaulted by her 58-year-old high school maths teacher, Nicholas Bester, when she was a 15-year-old. And Grace, at age 22, had decided she wanted to tell her story to the public to help educate them on the warning signs of grooming and to also break down the stigma and isolation around sexual violence. And I realised pretty quickly I couldn't tell Grace's story using her real name because of this absurd law. So we took her case to the Supreme Court and she did eventually win. But it cost about $10,000 in legal fees and it took quite a long time and it was quite a onerous process on Grace to do that. And at the time I thought, this is outrageous. And what does this mean that we're going to have to do this every single time another survivor comes forward? We're going to have to, take it back to court. So we just thought, well, it's not sustainable. We need to change the law itself and bring Tasmania and the Northern Territory into alignment with all other Australian jurisdictions. And that's when initially it was Grace and I who started the Let Her Speak campaign for law reform. And then a few months later, a woman called Nell got in contact and said, hey, I've actually been waiting 26 years to tell my story. Can I join?
Because it seems like it's just purely protecting the perpetrators and protecting their privacy. But is it designed as a sort of paternalistic approach where is the idea that, Nell, we've just got to protect you. You don't understand what you're subjecting yourself to by telling your own story. So we have to protect you from yourself.
Yeah, I think that the initial intention of the law was there wasn't a negative intention. The intention was protection. But the lawmakers at the time never conceptualised an environment or a Me Too movement where women have no shame and in actual fact feel proud of what we've survived and what we've come through, and that not only do we not need that paternalistic protection from the state, but we want to own our own stories.
I mean, I
or at least some
understand
of
the
us.
idea of saying I shouldn't be allowed to name you against your will, Nell, but the idea that you shouldn't be allowed to name yourself, what do you think? What?
I think it's ridiculous at my age. At my age, I think it's ridiculous. It should be a choice. So you make it so that it's a choice. So if you feel safe to speak out about your story, my story, which I do, then you should be allowed to, and it shouldn't be so difficult, and we shouldn't have to go through a court process to be able to do that.
Yeah, I don't understand why Nell wouldn't be able to literally tick a box on a form saying I give permission to myself. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, essentially that's why Tasmania and the Northern Territory have been working to reform this law, because it shouldn't be so complex and so onerous for the survivor. It's just taken them a bit of time to catch up with the other states and jurisdictions on this matter.
What's the argument against legalising women's right to tell their own story as adults?
Yeah, I think it comes down to concerns around media exploitation and coercive journalism. And I think that there is a need to balance the competing interests of, as you said before, survivors should always have the right to retain control over their own narrative and their own story. So we don't want to get into a situation where journalists can now name people without their consent either. So you have to craft the law carefully so that it provides an opportunity for those survivors who want to be self-identified while still protecting the privacy and interests of those who don't. And where that gets particularly complicated is in situations where you have multiple survivors from the same offender. So say you've got siblings who have both been abused by a stepfather, and one of those siblings wants to speak and the other one doesn't, and it's already been in public that this particular offender abused two children, and then people can guess and put pieces together. That's where the law and crafting law becomes quite fascinating, because you want to protect the rights of both of those victims. So that's where we have to start within the legislature, writing in things like the survivor can be identified provided by self-identifying they're not inadvertently compromising the privacy and anonymity of a secondary or subsequent third-party survivor.
Yeah. So it's a case-by-case basis, really, because, and also with every woman who is a sexual assault and rape survivor, one person might want to talk, another person never wants to talk about it again.
I would even think too that if you want to talk to us, Nell, it doesn't necessarily mean that you want this conversation then repeated in other forums and cut up and used out of context in other ways.
Oh, definitely. No, I don't want that. As soon as I walked in the door, I felt comfortable with both of you ladies. Yeah. And I think that's important to have that, to sit down with someone that you feel comfortable with to tell your story to, because it's a pretty traumatic story.
It's very harrowing from what I've read.
Even 26 years later, and there's a lot of it that I couldn't remember that come back to me over the years. Some stuff still where it's like, oh, did that really happen? But yeah, I don't want anyone to chop up my story or change it in any way.
It's an ethical question that I think about a lot in terms of lots of other scenarios, repeating victims' stories, and we do it a lot. It's troubling. So the permission to tell other people's stories is an ethical question that we wrestle with a lot. So I think that that's something that needs to be thought about. So in that way, thinking about giving permission to tell your story is a very big deal.
Yeah, it is.
Have you wanted to tell your story for a number of years, or was it only recently that you felt like you wanted to do it?
I got the idea that I wanted to write a book, and I wasn't aware at the time that if I wrote a book I couldn't put my identity to it. And I was on Twitter late one night and an article of Nina's come up, and I read it, and I can't use my identity, I can't use my name, and I thought, well, I can't write a book. What's the point?
Yeah, so it's Section 194K. It's all sexual assault survivors in Tasmania and the Northern Territory, regardless of the age they were at when the assault or assaults occurred.
That's the Act, Section 194K.
Section 194K of the Evidence Act.
Okay. So this is the first time that you have ever been able to tell your story.
Fully, yes. Fully.
As yourself.
As myself, yeah.
What, and you want to use your full name and do that?
Yeah.
What is your full name?
Janelle O'Connor.
And what happened?
Okay, I'll take you back to Christmas Eve, 1993. I was with a group of friends that night. We were at a party on Mount Street, at a house.
Where is this, by the way? Is this?
In Burnie, Tasmania, on the northwest coast. And at some stage, we decided to go down to the local pub. And I used to be able to get into the local pubs because I looked a little bit older. And my friends were a couple of years older than me as well. So we went down to the pub. I actually was not drunk that night, which in hindsight was a saving grace for me, I think, going through court, because they throw all sorts of crap at you. So we were down at the pub and I was with some friends, Beck and Jane, and Jane was talking to a group of men, so Beck and I went over and spoke to them too. I actually knew one of the guys, and we come to the decision, because it was getting closer to midnight and pubs were closing down, that we'd go back to the party that we'd been to previously. So Beck and I got in a cab together. I'm not sure where Jane ended up. And the guys that we'd been talking to followed us in the cab behind us. And we got halfway up Mount Street and Beck wanted to throw up. So the cab pulled over and got out of the car, and she was really sick. And she actually sort of lived like 5 minutes up around the corner anyway from where we'd pulled over. And the car pulled up behind us with the 5 men in it. And I knew the driver and I knew Glenn Last, who was in the back. I'd known him for a number of years. And anyway, so there was a discussion and Beck said, look, mate, I'm going to be all right. I'm just up around the corner. If you want to show him where it is, just go for it. And I spoke to the driver, said, hey, I'll show you boys where it is. Can you give me a lift home? Yep, no worries. So I got in the car and probably not even 5 minutes after I got in the car, I knew it was a mistake. So
from a feeling, or was anything said or done?
Just the feeling. It was like the energy, the atmosphere in the car just changed from light and jovial to, like, we'll, show you where the party is, to almost still. And so what happened was Haywood mentioned to the driver that he wanted to go out to Fernglade. And straight away I'm just like, oh, I'm in so much shit here, it's not funny.
Why was that? What is that place?
Years ago there'd been a girl raped out there at Fernglade, gang raped. It's a picnic spot, but it's like a bushy area where there's a nice little creek, and once you get there, you kind of got nowhere to run except for into the bush.
It's isolated, and
yeah.
In the middle of the night, it's not a picnic spot.
Yeah, and for some reason the little river kept running through my mind as well. So, but on the way to there's a bottle shop. So Haywood wanted alcohol, and it was shut. And I started talking, and I started to try to get the attention back to, hey, we'll go to this party, there's alcohol there, there's this and that there, we'll go back there. And it was when he started to drive back to that party that a knife came out. And by this stage, I'd actually, because I was in the back seat with the three men, I jumped up onto Glenn's knee because I knew Glenn. And I can't remember certain conversations that went on or anything like that, but I had a knife put up to my face. I had a knife put up to my throat. I was like, hey guys, this doesn't have to happen. Don't do this. Just please don't cut me, don't hurt me. So we turned onto what is called 3 Mile Line, which is a very long road. It's a country road. And Glenn, I'm pretty sure he said, it's okay. And then they wanted the car pulled over onto the side of the road. It was very abandoned. I couldn't see much light. And Glenn said to me, get out and run. Just run. And he got out from underneath me, and 2 of the men that were in the back got out and they started beating him, and I could hear them punching into him, and I couldn't run. And I jumped over to the front driver's seat, grabbed on to the driver, and I was begging him to drive. And I knew he had a daughter, and I said to him, think of me as your daughter. How would you feel if this was your daughter they were doing this to? Think of what they're going to do to me. Just fucking drive. And he said, I can't. They'll kill me. And I said, what do you think they're going to do to me, mate? And then Hayward kept coming back to the car, trying to pull me out of the car by my legs. And that's where I started to fight and kick back and throw punches, and because he's trying to pull me out of the car door, and so I'm leaning back as well. And I remember at one stage I actually got to kick him in the face, chest area, and he went back and he just jumped up and he hoed into me after that, and which I'd never in my whole life been hit by a man like that. So it was quite a shock it was the strangest feeling to be fully hit by a man. It's really terrifying, and especially at 16, because you're thinking all sorts of things like, how the hell am I going to get out of this? How long is this going to go on for? How many more punches can I take? So he stopped hitting me eventually, and they jumped back in the car, and I remember just sliding down onto the front driver's seat and roughly slided into the front seat, and so I was kind of in between his legs. And then Hayward and Marshall, the other 2 men, were in the back, and they said, drive. So they were trying to reach over to me as well and grab me on the breast and stuff, past roughly, and it was just crazy. And then I think it was Hayward that said, pull over, and we were near another paddock. And I just remembered jumping out of the car, but I couldn't go anywhere. I was like, where do I go? And I could see a house, and I thought, if I try and run to that house, something might happen to these people. They might get hurt. And so what happened was they ended up taking me into a paddock, and I was raped and bashed and verbally abused for a couple of hours. And then so I maintained no all the way through. And the really strange thing about all of it is one of the rapists thought I was going to be his girlfriend afterwards. Like, started saying stuff to me like, I want you to be my woman and blah, blah. And there was just so much said in that paddock that night, and it just got stranger and stranger as the night went on. So I kind of knew I had to get, if I wanted to live, I had to get this guy on side. And so when they finished raping me, he told me to get dressed, and I got dressed, and he was walking out of the paddock with me, and the other two were behind me laughing and whatnot. And I remember saying to him, you know, if you like me, you won't let them do anything else to me tonight. You'll get me out of this, and I'll more or less be grateful for you for doing that. And I can't remember the conversations in between, but anyway, we got back into the car, and Haywood had decided that I was going to go and dig my own grave or hole. And I'm not religious. I'm not a religious person, and I haven't told many people this. So they put me back in the car, and I could just picture myself digging my own grave, and all I wanted to do was go home to my mum and dad. And I kept thinking about my friends and my family and how much I wanted to live. My last year of grade 10, it's like everything flashes before your eyes. And it goes so quickly. And, okay, so they started the car, and the road was slippery for some reason. And I remember I didn't put my seatbelt on. No one had their seatbelt on. They went around a corner. In my mind, I still don't know whether I said it out loud or in my mind, God help me. God help me. And the car flipped. And it rolled 3 times. And I'm in the back, and I could see them being thrown around in the car, but it was like I stayed still. It was like I didn't get tossed. I stayed in my seat. And on the very last roll, my head got thrown back and then to the side of the car, and I got knocked out. But the next thing I knew, I was being dragged up another driveway because the police and ambulance were coming in the distance. So someone must have already reported that anyway, or heard the car accident. So I'm being dragged up a driveway. He's pushed me down into some grass, and it was like he put a jumper over my head or my face, and he was telling me to be quiet, and I couldn't move. And really, I just wanted to scream out. Because I was aware that there was the police there, but they didn't. It was like they didn't stay for long. But the timing in my mind was probably all completely different because I was so traumatized and head injury, yeah. And they went. And after they left, he dragged me back down the driveway, and by this stage he was like, I'm going to be your boyfriend, and just all this bizarre stuff. And I was like, oh my God. A cab came. And my dad's a cab driver.
So was mine. Yeah.
Oh.
So they've got 100 eyes all over the town.
Yeah, that's it.
And they know each other's kids.
Yeah. My dad took to picking my friends up off the street afterwards to make sure they got home safe. The cab came, and strangely enough, I got taken to a girl's house that I went to school with because she was seeing one of my rapist's brother. She turned out not to be a very good friend in court. So I got taken back to this unit. I went into the bedroom with her, and because I was a mess, I had dirt and blood and my face was bruised, and she was like, what the hell has happened to you? And all I could say to start with was car accident. And then I got changed and I said to her, I've got to go. I need to get home to my mum and dad. Like, this is like 3 o'clock in the morning, like Christmas morning by this stage. And I want to get back to my mum and dad and whatnot. And then we walked back out to the lounge room, and 2 of the perpetrators walked through the door. The other rapist that took me to the unit standing next to me. So it was like, I can't go anywhere. I'm just in the strangest situation that I can't get out of. When is this going to end? And he looked at me and said, oh, good, she's alive. And that's when the so-called friend that I grew up with actually said, what have you guys done to her? Now, around about this stage, her boyfriends walked into the room, blind, rotten, drunk, passed out on the floor, just made a complete idiot of himself, and she had to drag him out of the room and put him into bed. So, again, the situation changed. She wasn't in the room with me. I'm in the room with them. So, for me, it was sitting back watching and waiting, and because they were all off their heads and there was other people in this unit as well, I sat in the corner of a room, and eventually I must have passed out. And when I come to, there was daylight, and I had this, you know, the Parmesan cane chairs that you put the cushions in? Someone had taken the cushion out of it and put the cane part over the top of me, like I was in a cage. And I remember looking around, and I had one rapist to the side of me, another to the other side, and one was on the lounge. And I'm thinking, I've got to get the fuck out of here, and I've got to do it now, and I've got to be very quiet about it. I just so quietly took it off me, crept through this lounge room, opened the door, and as soon as I got out of that door, I just ran. I ran. I've never ran so fast in my whole life. And I kept running until I got to a phone box near a shopping centre. And there was no one on the road or any Christmas morning. I think it was like 6 o'clock in the morning by this stage. And I rang a cab. The first thing I did was ring a cab. I didn't think call the police. I just wanted to get home.
Yeah, I get that.
And I wanted to get home before my mum and dad woke up. I wanted to clean myself up. I was trying to think, my God, how am I going to explain this? What am I going to say? So the cab came, and he was actually one of my dad's friends. And he was like, Jesus Christ, what's happened to you tonight? I'm just like, mate, get me home. I just want to go home. But he was a witness in court, the cab driver. So I get home, I walk through the back door, I strip off, I throw my clothes in the washing machine, except for my bra and undie, and I walk straight to the shower. And I think I was in there probably an hour. The hottest shower I've ever had. And I just, being 16 and not understand, I had no thought of going to the police. So I wasn't thinking evidence-wise or anything like that. You don't think of that when you're 16, especially back in 1993. It was still so taboo to talk about rape or sexual assault back then. So I had a shower, I got changed, I went and laid in bed, and I just passed out. And the next thing I knew, my brother come into my room probably midday and was really annoyed with me because I hadn't bothered to get up and have Christmas lunch with mum and dad. And then he's looked at me, he's like, geez, what have you been out fighting all night? You know, you should know better. What's mum and dad going to say? And I'm just like, oh, look, piss off and leave me alone. You've got no idea the night that I had. Just leave me alone. And then I got up and I walked out, and my dad's reaction was kind of the same, like, what have you been doing? So I called my best friend, Adam. I was like, Adam, you need to come and get me. And he's like, no, what are you on about? It's Christmas Day. I'm going to my nan's. I'm like, no. And I've just gone, Adam, I've been raped and bashed. Come and get me now. And within 5 minutes, he was there. Adam asked me, he said, what do you want to do? And I more or less just wanted to forget about it. I do not want to deal with it. My brain wouldn't connect up to make a decision. And he said to me, you have two choices. You either report this to the police and you do something about it. If you don't report it to the police, every time you go out and they see you, you are fair game. And they're probably going to do it to other women because they're going to get away with it. So Adam said to me, I'm taking you to Beck's. In the meantime, Beck's calling my mum and dad's house. She got up and she had this bad gut feeling. And I think she asked my dad, did she make it home okay? And I don't know what my dad said to her. So we ended up at Beck's place. Who lived with her mum, Maureen, and Maureen's ex-husband was a police officer back in the day. So I knocked on the door and Adam's behind me and Beck answered the door. And as soon as she looked at me, she knew. And she said, oh my God, what did they do to you? And we went inside and she went and got Maureen. And we went into the bedroom. And I had to tell Maureen what had happened. And Maureen explained to me that it was really important that I tried to tell her word for word what had happened, because I think she knew she was more or less the first person that I was telling the whole story to.
Do you think Maureen knew that she would be a witness at some point in a legal proceeding?
Beck was a witness as well, and so Maureen said to me, we have to report this. I have to take you down to the police station. I was like, I don't want my mum and dad to know. I'll do it if my mum and dad don't find out. And because I was 16, they had to tell my mum and dad anyway. So we went to the police station and the police that interviewed me that day were absolutely wonderful. They were amazing, and these men were well known for different things.
Were they known for sex offences?
One of them was, but I don't think he'd ever been charged. Hayward killed a woman before he raped me. It was a hit and run. She was a school teacher, and he was drunk, and he ran her over, and he killed her, and he ran from the scene. And in hindsight, I wonder, this man's criminal record spanned from 1983 through to probably a few years before he died. It never ended. He was just pure evil. Scum of the earth, really. Sorry, I lost where we're at.
So you were at the police station?
Police station, yeah.
When you say that you didn't want your parents to know and that was just sort of your initial gut reaction, had you had lots of talks with your parents about staying safe, how to stay safe as a young girl? Because if anything, God forbid, happens to our daughters, it may make it difficult for them then to come back and speak to us about it because they may think they'll get in trouble. Was there any of that sort of feeling for you at the time?
What it was for me, and I have not brought, except I've spoken to Nina about it. I was molested as a child by a family member for a number of years, and it should have been picked up on. Medically, it should have been picked up on. And I told my mum when I was 12, and my mum didn't believe me. And it was her father. And I wasn't the only one in the family that he'd done it to. Can we have a break?
Yeah, of course. And you know what? Do you want an air conditioning break, by the way?
Yeah,
no worries, babe. No worries. God.
Good on you for asking.
Yeah. Hang on. The air conditioning on. It's really hot out there for you, but it's unasking. There you go, sweetheart. Do you want a coffee or any food or anything? That's so sweet. Yes.
Yeah, we'll go and
If you'd like to speak to someone about today's episode, you can access counselling and referral services at 1800 RESPECT, that's 1800 737 732, or Lifeline 13 11 14.
Okay, so yes, we were talking about why it was that you felt that you could tell Maureen, your best mate's mum, everything, but you so didn't want your mum and dad to know what had happened to you in the paddock. Do you want to say it, or do you want me to just reiterate?
You can reiterate, yeah.
That your grandfather, your mum's father, had molested you when you were younger. You had told your mum and she didn't believe you.
Yeah.
And that does make it really difficult then to tell her that this has happened. But also, what was your reaction then as a younger girl to that situation?
I remember I ran away that day and I went to a friend's house.
How old were you when you told her?
12. Just before I got to grade 7. So it was the end of grade 6 coming into grade 7 through the holidays, I'm pretty sure. I'd actually told a friend about it as well that had lived down the road from us.
Was it still happening at that time?
No, it stopped. I think it stopped when I was around about 8 or 9. He actually got charged with molesting his daughter.
So you weren't even the first person to say it?
No, I wasn't. And we could never work out when he got charged, which he got let off, because my nan had died not long before that, and I think he used that and medication he'd been given as an excuse. But it had gone on for years. But I guess at the time, because my mum didn't believe what happened to me with my grandfather, part of me felt like she wasn't going to believe this. I never had permission to talk about what had happened to me as a child either. It was just swept under the rug. We don't talk about this. Pretend it never happened. It caused me a lot of problems through high school. A lot of problems. Bad-tempered. Fire up before, you could even think of the consequence. Principal used to call me Rebel Rouser. But in saying that, I had a good heart. I was always for the underdog. If someone at school was being picked on, I was there going, well, come on, take me on, leave them alone.
But so from their perspective, they might have said there were behavioural problems?
Oh, yeah. I had major behavioural problems, learning difficulties. I always felt, I guess, different to girls I went to school with. I used to look at them and they seemed to have everything so together and their lives were good and their parents were adjusted, and I felt like a freak, an absolute freak through high school. And I got through high school being aggressive and outspoken.
It's only just occurred to me as you're speaking that if you wanted to, as a parent, you could probably say to yourself, she's lying about my father molesting her and that's part of her troubled behaviour, rather than the troubled behaviour is a result of my father molesting her.
My dad and we would talk about it. I actually remember my dad saying, well, what happened? Tell me. And I said, well, all those times, it took me to the doctor and I had urine infections. Like, come on.
Did the doctors ever ask anything?
Every weekend after you made me spend a weekend at his house, you were taking me to the doctor. I wanted my dad to do something about it, and at the time, you're too young to think about police or anything like that, but because nothing was done about it, when I got raped by the 3 men, I had this drive for justice. I was going to keep going. I was not going to back down. I was going to speak my truth, and they were going to go to jail for what they'd done to me, because I will never ever get justice for what my grandfather done to me, ever. We'll never ever get that. He's dead. He died a painful death. I'm grateful he died a painful death. He deserved it for the torture, and it was torture that he put us through. And, you know, you take that through to the next generation. As a mother, if you can't come to some sort of peace with yourself, it comes out in other ways.
So you went to court, you fought.
Yeah.
And you were still a teenager, by the way.
Yeah, that's incredible.
What was the outcome of that?
Okay, so I had a committal where the judge said, yeah, this is going to trial. And then I had a trial, and they were found guilty.
How many? How many of them were? All 3?
All 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, all 3 were found guilty. And then a few months after that, the Daryl Coates called me and he said, Janelle, I don't really want to tell you this, but he was a Crown prosecutor. There's an appeal, and they've won the appeal, and it can go back to court. If you don't want to go, I understand. And I said, no, Daryl, we're going back to court.
Was that an appeal from 3 men or 1 man or
3?
It was all 3.
From the whole 3.
There were more men in there that night.
Yeah.
What happened?
Okay, Glenn. Okay, Glenn. The next morning, a guy on a motorbike found Glenn on the side of the road, got him to the hospital. Glenn was in a really, really bad way. I don't know how long he was in hospital for. All I know is when he got out of hospital, his mum put him on a plane to Queensland. He was charged with nothing because they wanted to use him in court as evidence for me. He's still around in Burnie. You know, when I first come back, he actually still had the car.
Oh, my God.
The same car.
He was the one who ran, wasn't he?
He
begged
ran.
him to help?
Yeah, I begged him for help. He knew my parents. He knew me as a newborn baby.
How old was he? He was older than you?
My parents, he was older than all of them. Yeah, he would have been, one was in their late 20s and the other 2 were in their mid-30s.
Oh, so they were all substantially older than you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they're a lot older than me.
So did he give evidence on your behalf?
He did, yeah. I didn't sit in court that day that he done that. Then we had the retrial. There was one lawyer in particular, Hayward's lawyer. He took the court case very, very personally, a very well-known lawyer down Tassie. I even had him follow me around town once, you know, just strange stuff like that. There was only two at the retrial, 2 men. One of the other men had been...
They dropped the charges.
On what grounds?
Dropped the charges. Look, you know, to start off with, they were up on 70-something charges between them. As the trials went on, the charges that just kept getting dropped were ridiculous. We had the retrial, and it come back hung jury. And I have a fair idea who that jury member was, because she kept getting the judge, sending pieces of paper to the judge to ask me questions like, well, if it was dark, how could you see in the paddock? And they even took the jury up to the paddock at night, right? And I just remember thinking, the stars and the moon, and it was a clear night, and you know,
your eyes adjust to the
your
dark.
eyes adjust to it. It wasn't that dark. I knew exactly who was doing what. Like, lady,
Just the
come
interrogation
on.
you've got to go through of justifying your experience or something. I don't know. It
was. I
screwed up.
I felt like I was getting raped over and over and over again. And, you know, the stupid thing about me not being able to speak in public was my court cases were open court. Anyone in that town could walk in and sit down while I was on the witness box, and they did. You know, you'd have one side filled up with their family and friends. You'd have one side of the courtroom filled up with my family and my friends, and you had me who was sitting from here to Himaway with a police officer in the middle of us. That's how far away they were from me. I had them putting their fingers across their throat in front of the jury. The knife, one of them done the knife thing. When we were coming into the courthouse, their friends would be standing there doing gun fingers. My parents had their friends driving past their house of a night time. The second court case, I had to go into like a witness protection thing and get put into a hotel and away from it all because my parents were getting phone calls, tell her not to go to court, you're going to die, we're going to burn your house down. So, okay, we get a hung jury, and this time Daryl's like, no, we really shouldn't do it again. So, yeah, we're doing it one more time. So we'd done it one more time. During that time, I tried to kill myself. I got into a lot of trouble. I started doing all sorts of drugs. I pushed myself as far as I could possibly go. And I felt like I was running out of time. I guess I was mentally sort of thinking, I'm going to get through this, and I've done what I need to do, and I've kept other women safe in my town if they go to jail, and now I can let go. I can just fucking kill myself. But it didn't work out that way. I was really lucky I met Ryan when I did, and that we decided to move when we did. So then with the last retrial, the two men were found guilty. Hayward was found guilty and Ruffley was found guilty, and they got sent back to jail. Yeah.
And then you moved to Queensland?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
And got on with life.
And here we are, how many years later?
26.
And you're allowed to tell us your story.
Yeah.
With your own name attached and your own face attached.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Relieved and extremely empowered by the Let Her Speak campaign, because without Nina and Grace doing what they've done, the fight would have been taken longer to get to the point where we don't have to go to court and pay money to be able to use our identity to talk about our
outrageous, isn't
story.
it? Having to pay to tell your story.
Earlier in the conversation, you were saying that when you finally got home, you didn't know anything about what to do. You put your clothes in the washing machine, all of that stuff, because you said, I didn't know anything about evidence or anything about rape or what to do. And I thought to myself, it's laws like this that silenced victims were part of the reason why you didn't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, because we didn't talk about it back then. You know, you probably see American TV shows or, you know, stuff like that, but it doesn't relate to.
So the conversation that you've just had, the story you've just told, literally millions of people, has informed so many women.
Yeah.
About what to do if, God forbid, they are ever in the same situation, you know?
Well, the thing is, I took my underwear off and I threw it in the linen basket. That underwear had DNA on it, and that is also part of what put one of those rapists into jail. That evidence, that was vital evidence, DNA.
So that did not go into the washing machine that day?
That did not go into the washing machine, but everything else did. And because I, you know, you wash yourself, so there was nothing to take from under my nails. There wasn't.
Because you showered for an hour and all that.
And you just scrub yourself. And so having that evidence on my underwear helped. I was very relieved when I knew it was the last court case, and I was angry because, you know, one of the guys didn't get to. There were 3 of them that night. They know what they done. I know what they done. And yeah, they all should have been in those court cases together to the very end, and they all should have gone to jail.
Yeah, but we also know what you have done, which is amazing.
Incredible.
It's incredible. You are still so young to fight so hard and fight all of those people and those obstacles. Congratulations on you.
Thank you.
What a woman you are.
I want to do a book, I guess a survival guide through court for survivors.
I think that would be really amazing.
We have this conversation so much, don't we, with people saying, I didn't know. Who knows what to do? No one does.
I mean, if I knew now, back then, not that things would have been easier, but we didn't have the support back then either that we have now. We have a lot more support groups, but I would like to see more support in court and to write how I would do it now if I had to go through court, and just to try and empower other survivors, because we're so broken, you know, and it's so... For me now, it's not an everyday battle. Christmas is hard. Try and put that out of your mind now. It's about the kids. My kids are getting older, though. That was a thought that went through my head this year. My kids are getting older. How am I going to deal with this sort of as the years go on? Because it's all about them now. But, you know, I just... Being here with you guys, with everyone here in this room, and being able to talk to you and tell you what happened to me is just... My heart feels so good.
Thank you to Janelle O'Connor for choosing to share her story with us. And thank you to Nina Funnel, the creator of the Let Her Speak campaign, in partnership with news.com.au, End Rape on Campus Australia, and Mark Lawyers. You can find links on our Facebook page. If you need to talk to someone about issues raised in this podcast, you can access counselling services and onward referral from 1-800-RESPECT. That's 1-800-737-732 or Lifeline 13 11 14. Thank you for downloading this episode of Australian True Crime. We'll be back next week.
Juggling running your own business from home, looking after the kids, and paying overseas suppliers? Maybe it's time to talk to an OF expert like Ryan. You could save thousands on international payments. Small things can make a big difference to your business, like being able to call an OF expert anytime, day or night. Get an OF expert like Ryan working for you. ofx.com/save. Consider the PDS.